In the spring of 2019, over 30 Columbus artists traveled to Cuba to participate in a life-changing experience, pairing their own artworks alongside those of native Cuban artists. The journey raised many questions about the impact traveling has on artists and what the future will be for both the arts and the larger community of Columbus, Ohio, after being exposed to the vibrant people and cultures of Cuba.
So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lolo's amazing, beautiful gallery.
Artists and designers are often on the sort of leading edge of culture and moving it forward. So when a group of artists have an opportunity to go experience what life is like in Cuba and then bring that back home here to Columbus, it gives all of us just a taste of that experience. So I think that it does a great service to the entire community to help expand our whole community's worldview.
The first visit was an opportunity to meet with Cuban artists and get a sense of what their life is like as Cuban artists and sort of open that dialogue between us, which was really just very conversational about what do you do and how do you do it and what do you do when you sell work and where does that money go, and it's sort of an interesting aspect of that. So there was an awakening a little bit about a cultural gap and how they deal with art and how we deal with art.
I think the graciousness of the people that we visited and the genuine personalities that were kind of offered to us was a sensitive nature that we're not as used to here in America. And looking through that lens and viewing a generosity from one culture to another, that was definitely something I used in this piece and that I will be using in the future to come.
What this does for us as a community is we get to hear the voices of Cuban artists. We get our own insights into Cuban life, Cuban culture, the Cuban art. I think that is so fundamentally important. This is our way among people and artists and to connect.
It's important for us to be able to see different aspects of the world. So in order to be able to create and to know our voices specifically, we have to be able to know the voices of others. So specifically Cuba was amazing for me because I've never been out of the country, and so it was specifically, empowering and inspiring because for once in my life I was not the minority. And so to be in a space like that where people are respected and honored as artists.
We all have our own perspectives that we're bringing to this trip, and we're all there to connect with people. And so we open ourselves up to this greater connection while we're there, and it's through those moments that you realize that people are people. We're essentially the same. When you stay in one place, you don't know what's outside. And if you stay in one place from birth till death, and you have kids who stay in one place from birth till death, and you get isolated.
As Americans, you can be very, very myopic about your life and your worldview. Anytime you travel, you step outside of that. You see yourself in a different context. You see your country through someone else's lens. And I think that's the biggest thing you get out of travel. I think our job is to provide that experience to people without having to travel.
Visiting Cuba was another experience for me to see people who live a life different than ours, not always easier than ours, not always more difficult than ours, but different than ours, and they have their own struggles that we don't always experience. And so I was able to bring in those, a new field of experience and a new field of survival and a new field of endurance and triumph outside of my normal point of view. And that's all, as an artist, that's just all fodder for future creation.
I think it's really important to get outside of what you're used to take risks, to travel places you haven't been, feel uncomfortable, and then it'll open your eyes to things that even things that you see all the time may look different when you come back.
You see the world differently through the eyes of the people in those places you visit, and it's good to be vulnerable. It's good to doubt instead of having control of everything. It's always good to be put somewhere where you don't know what to expect.
It makes sense to have an exchange of artists, and to realize that outside my world, there's also some wonderful stuff, but I actually don't know everything. It's a big shock.
It was a tremendous opportunity because we're an extremely diverse group, age and gender and race and everything. And so many of these artists I wasn't familiar with and probably wouldn't have been. Isn't that a funny thing to say, living in Columbus, Ohio, but we had to go to Cuba to meet each other and understand each other's work, and that was a great opportunity.
Cuba made me realize all this notion of abundance that we have as an artist. If they don't have it, they work with the most simplest, basic things, and they produce the most beautiful work I've ever seen in my life. It really made me realize that this camera and that lens that expands, that all this stuff that doesn't really matter. We have to look internally to produce work that really can last a generation. And as an artist, and I know I can name at least 10 artists that always say, I want to do this exhibit, but I don't have this piece, therefore I'm not going to do it. Go see Cuba and see how they're producing work, and you'll definitely change your mind.
For me, as an African American, we talk about repurpose, recycling. That's nothing new to us. You know, we've always made do with what was readily available to us. And that's what I saw a lot in Cuba with the Cuban artists. You know, okay, well, I don't have this color paint, or I don't have this paintbrush, but I can finagle this to turn it into a paintbrush.
As I made friends that work in the market, sell their artwork in the market, one thing I really want to take away from it is that I'm fortunate that I have galleries and shops that can sell my work for me, and that my own gallery shop owners will sell my work for what it's worth. And I realized there that it's not the same way. Work has to sell, and people will take a loss just to survive.
Helping artists, local, international, understand the business of art and being an artist, not that they don't want that, but giving them those opportunities to grow. It's like any entrepreneur. They love what they love, but someone has to teach them and support them more so on the business side of it.
When I was there, I experienced the people who were, for whatever reason, less concerned about material and more concerned about the person next to them. And while I say that's kind of who I've always been, it hasn't always reflected in the work. The care, the respect, the camaraderie hasn't always been reflected in the work. Seeing the joy on a child's face when you hand them a soccer ball, you know, I took that back with me. So even if the work itself is not happy work, I'm appreciative to even be able to do it. Because that's what got me down there in the first place. And a lot of times I think if we don't necessarily appreciate the craft, we don't appreciate the privilege that it is to do these things that we do, because everybody can't do them.
I think one of the things that I was the most fascinated by was this concept of being a maker to make and not being in the rat race of making. And that really made me think about who I was in my own practice in studio. And I started to kind of forget about who's making around me and why they're making. I'm in there for a reason. Just like all those Cuban artists are in their studios making for a reason. There's this love for making.
I believe that artists who have the opportunity to go into new environments really have the opportunity to grow their artistic talents. They're also able to see people in a different way, place. They also realize how many great things we have in our city here in Columbus, Ohio, and our state, because it's a pretty great place to live where artists are supported.
Extending an embrace to the Cuban people is an opportunity for growth for us. Through this special project, some of our city's brightest and most talented artists have been inspired by the kindness, talents, and beauty of the island and their residents, and we hope that we have done the same for them.